to be quite frank, I didn't want anything to do with soccer at that point. I felt burnt out. I was sad about it. I knew that deep down in my heart, like that wasn't going to be it for me.
Today on the show, I have former pro soccer player and a graduate of St. Thomas University in Houston. Siobhan Higgins is up next. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive into the stories of retired athletes, their perseverance, their resilience, their career pivots, and finding the passion they crave. So get ready to dive into the true stories from the athletes themselves, talking frankly about finding their true calling after their competitive careers end. So grab your iced tea because I'm from the South. Get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Today's guest is a retired professional soccer player hailing from Houston, Texas, a graduate of the University of St. Thomas with a pro career spanning multiple countries. Now she's a sports psychology consultant and the host of her very own podcast, Mind Goals. Welcome to the show, Siobhan Higgins.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You are quite welcome. I love to tell people how we met, and we actually met kind of through LinkedIn and kind of through another soccer player. So Taryn,
hmm
she's a soccer, well, she's retired now, and she's going to be on a future episode. And she had sent me a podcast link that you had interviewed her for your podcast. And I read your story and I was like, this is really cool. I'm all about, Women's History Month and everything. And you, well, I'm not going to share that right yet, but where you were officially born,
hmm
I have that heritage. So
Oh,
that was another little thing. We'll get into that in the story, but that was
okay.
another little thing. And of course, I spent 16 years in Houston, so I'm all about showing that. So I'm happy to have you today. You reached out back out to me, and now I'm just babbling on and on and on. But let's talk. Let's talk about where you grew up, where you were officially born, and where you call home.
Okay. So I was born in Perth, Scotland, and I moved to America, specifically Katy, Texas, in 2000 when I was 4 years old. So I have been here in Katy, Texas, raised and lived here and basically my entire life up until 2019, where I began my endeavors of playing soccer abroad.
Right. So, where is Perth, Scotland?
It is
And
northeast of Edinburgh.
okay, I've actually been to Edinburgh, so yeah, it gives me chills. It's a beautiful country. It really is. So, is your dad and your mom both Scottish?
I love this question. I always get it. The answer is no, and I don't have any other Scottish family members. I was simply born in Scotland while my family was living there, and my dad is English and my mother is Ecuadorian.
That's very interesting too. So,
Yeah.
obviously, you probably get a lot of questions about how you got your name, your first name.
Yes. Yeah. So my name is Irish, which is very misleading, and last name as well. I believe great grandfather was Irish, and
Okay.
so my dad just traveled a lot in throughout the UK, and like the name Siobhan, it's very common over there. It's like
Right.
saying Jessica or Natalie, and
Right.
so that's where I got the name Siobhan. It was either that or Natalie. They chose to make my life difficult with spelling.
And you when you told me what year you were kind of born, that aged me quite a bit, made me feel kind of old. But that's okay. We're all good. It's all good. It's all about how you think about it. So let's talk about and for those out there that don't know, Katy is a suburb kind of Houston.
Yeah.
And what was it like growing up in South Texas, really? And how did sports come into play? No pun
Um,
intended there.
Yeah, I know. Good one. That's funny. I find myself saying, "What's the game plan?" Like
Yeah.
everything is sports related with my verbiage. But Katy, Texas, yeah, it's a suburb of Houston, like you mentioned. I had a great time living here. I love the South. I love the heat, love the weather. Um, it was interesting because soccer wasn't my first sport. I began playing soccer actually when I was 12, which is quite late. I
Right.
did basketball, track, swimming, gymnastics, all the things. And I mean, I think that being in America really helped me find my way with soccer because there's so many sports to offer. And that's
Sure.
very uncommon actually in other countries, specifically in Europe. There's maybe like one or two, or not many sports are gender equal. And so they
Right.
don't offer it to everyone. But I found myself at a good advantage because there was a lot of opportunity for me here, whether that be club sports or travel sports or
Right.
just high school sports. There's a lot of opportunity. So it really helped me living down here in Houston.
So I did not go back and do my research about the women's national team here. But so when you were kind of starting, who was like the big female people, females in America for soccer when you were kind of starting to play soccer?
Yeah, great question. When I was starting, it was Abby Wambach, it was
Okay.
Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd. They were the
Right.
big three at the time.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Mia
still
Hamm
are.
had already retired, who I
Mhm.
kind of is the one that I'm most familiar with just because I was quite a bit younger then and that's the one I kind of looked up to. So what about soccer made you resonate towards that more than the other sports?
I was choosing between basketball and soccer. Once I entered high school, I had to become, more serious about one or the other. It's very time consuming, but it
Right.
was a tough decision. And I think I went with the fact that I just purely loved all of it and then the social aspect. So I had a lot of my friends, a lot of friends I had made
Right.
were through soccer or different teams. And so I think I just loved it more than I loved basketball. And so dad won because mom was like, do basketball, and dad was like, do soccer. But yeah, it came more naturally to me.
So did your parents, either one of them or both, play any type of sports in high school or college?
Not in college, but yes, in high school, my mom played basketball, my dad played soccer. Yeah,
So there was like that competitiveness in the house too. Um,
correct. Very competitive.
So you played, and I was looking at your notes. You said you played 2 years at your high school in Katy. And why
Yes.
didn't you play 4 years?
It's a great question. Yeah, I quit after my sophomore year of high school, and it was really more of like I would say that it was because like looking back, I was more immature with my decisions. I was
Sure,
unhappy with the coach and with my playing
sure,
time, and I didn't understand why, I wasn't getting certain game
right.
time or I was. And I also played club at the time, and
Mhm.
I was also committed to a university already. So I decided since I was kind of unhappy with the high school team or coach that I would take a step back so that I could, um, you know, prevent injury playing at the high
Sure.
school level since I was
Okay.
already committed and I had time commitments elsewhere.
So you were recruited before being a junior in high school by St. Thomas, University of St. Thomas?
Um, Also something I didn't mention, but no, I committed to another school prior and I transferred my sophomore year of college. So my freshman year, I went to Morehead State University, which is a Division I school in Morehead, Kentucky.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense now because I did a little stalking on Google
Uh-huh.
and so that makes perfect sense. But that's interesting. You're a freshman, sophomore in high school and you're already being recruited by colleges.
Yeah, it's very common. And I actually believe I committed my junior year, but you can commit as early as freshman, sophomore, and it's very young.
So what was like that? What was that recruiting like? So you were probably what, 2010,
I graduated high school in 2014.
2014? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the recruiting like for you at that time period?
So at that time, it was heavily influenced by the club or the travel club that you played with or your
Okay.
parents.
Okay.
So I think now times have really changed where you can even have an agent or high schools
Yeah,
do it.
it's
But
crazy.
yeah, I know they're so
It's just
advanced.
crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm so out of the loop now, but I just hear bits and bobs. But for me, it was going to tournaments that college coaches are going to be at, and you would send them an email, or your parents would send them an email, or your coach would, and say, "Hey, Siobhan's going to be playing on
Right,
sorry, a game here, field
right.
7. Come and watch, please. She's very interested. This is her GPA right now." And then you kind of give like a little resume, but
Right.
coaches at that time, I believe, before junior year you weren't allowed to communicate directly with the coach. It was
Mm,
by like a third party.
right. It's crazy now because I've interviewed some athletes, actually basketball players that are now coaching,
Mhm.
and many of them came up like over where social media got really started. And we really talked about the dynamics of what recruiting was like before social media and what it's been like after. and
Yeah.
some of the women were like, we would come home and there'd be like, we'd have the mail slot in the door and we couldn't get the door open because there were all these letters. And
Wow.
then, now it's just it's almost like a PR campaign. You almost need a PR firm to run
Yeah.
it. And everybody is truly a product. Every
Yeah.
athlete is truly a product. Um, I'm obviously big in, I'm here in Memphis. And so we were big into basketball. And I was just looking at, as a side note, I was just looking at the NIL today. They were already talking about
Mhm.
players going into the portal. And some of these guys are asking for $500,000.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like they're not that good. and
Mm-hmm.
and the real reality of that is that it's just I call it the wild wild west right now. It's just crazy.
That sounds fitting.
It is, right, we should be playing that song from Will Smith. But so obviously then you you don't play your junior and senior year at high school, but you're in a travel club or
Yes.
that type of atmosphere. But did that take some of the pressure off of you? Because I see so many athletes that in their high school years, they've got all this pressure of, being every season being the ultimate, trying to up themselves every year. Did that take some of the pressure off of you that you had already committed?
Yeah, being committed definitely took pressure off because it's pretty stressful. You're like, am I gonna play? Does anybody
Right.
want me? Where am I gonna go? It's all up in the air. And then you see other people committing and it's like a race. Like when am I gonna get
Yeah.
chosen? But
Right.
being committed to a university junior year was definitely helpful. And then, but not playing in high school, I wouldn't say that I think it took pressure off in the sense of I had more time. So I didn't
Right.
have to go to practice after school. I could focus on my grades and then I worked a little bit.
Right.
So, yeah.
It was interesting. You made the reference to maybe a lack of maturity in making that quick decision, but
Hmm.
I think that is what the mindset of most high school athletes are. You want that opportunity to play more, and it's just a reflection of the age and what's going on and the dynamics of everything. Why did you? Because I'm not familiar with Moorhead, but I'm familiar with Kentucky. Like, so
Yeah.
what about that school made you or encouraged you to go to Kentucky to a school?
Yeah. Again, great question. I would say that it was a random decision, but first and foremost, it was Division 1, and I was very focused on playing in a Division 1 university.
Okay,
Second, two of the girls I played with in high school went to that university, so that's how I
okay,
heard the name.
right.
And they spoke very highly of it. It was a really great team. And then I went to visit and I liked it. It's a
Mhm.
small town, um, right off the highway. You'd miss it if you miss the exit. You won't get there until 30 more minutes. But yeah, that's what drew me to the school is that I knew people there, so I was comfortable with it. It was kind of like I had a I don't know, like a foot in the door,
You
you
had a
know.
foundation already there, a
Yeah.
familiar
Yes.
foundation there. And Kentucky is a beautiful state. It has some gorgeous areas there, especially as you get towards the eastern part and all the mountains and stuff. It's just really, really gorgeous.
Yeah, it
Um,
was beautiful.
what was it like then? Okay, so as you're graduating from high school, what
Mhm.
was your goal with the college route? Like what was your mindset then and what were you looking to do?
So my mindset transitioning from high school to college was solely to focus on soccer. And this is something that if I would advise myself now, I would have said maybe put a little bit more thought into the university that you're going to
Yes,
because
I've heard that.
things happen. And in the case you don't have your sport, you're left with your
Right,
university, which is going to be your future.
right.
So you need to put a lot of thought into what you plan on studying, the environment that you're putting yourself into, because in the end, sport is not everlasting, but the education and your job is probably going to outlast your sport.
So many athletes that have been on the show have talked about that.
Yeah.
That if that was the one biggest piece of advice, it would be to, look at what the school has to offer education
Yes.
wise and
Yep.
really focus on that. The other thing that I noticed is a lot of because you're actually the first soccer player that I've had on the show.
Woohoo.
And you know, a lot of the basketball players, they talked about how the difference between the women's and the men's was that the women coaches were pushing, what's your plan B? What are
Hmm.
you going to,
Ooh,
what are you going to do after that? They were teaching these other skill sets that a female would need after college, whereas the men were not being taught that as much.
interesting.
And yeah, it was really interesting. And I was really impressed because there were a couple of coaches, and I can't remember the names off the top of my head. And I was like, that's like some heavy, like that's really good, like not just coaching, but helping them to become better people,
Yeah.
so you're absolutely right about that. What did you want to study? So when you were a senior in high school, what did you want to study in college?
I was one of those that didn't quite know, but
Yeah.
my senior year in high school, I actually tore my ACL about 2 months before graduation, and it really compelled me to want to study kinesiology because I was interested in becoming a
Right.
physical therapist, which I didn't end up finishing, but I tailored my route to more of the, I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to do something in sports and
Right.
people oriented. So my degree was biology and it was like a pre-physical therapy route.
Right.
And so the first 2 years I did that, and then I transitioned into psychology and graduated with my degree in psychology.
Interesting. So Moorhead, you're there. What was the difference? You're on campus. Was it a big adjustment for you going from not only like another state, but kind of another culture in some ways, and then just a whole different atmosphere? And now you're a college athlete versus a high school athlete.
Yeah, I would say it was a very big transition for me. Um, and then the transition from Moorhead to St. Thomas was even greater, but in a more positive aspect. But going into Moorhead, it was um, Houston's very densely populated, and so
Yeah.
there was a lot of people. And Moorhead, like I mentioned, is just a stop off the highway, and people go home on the weekends, and I wasn't aware of that. So I was thinking, I was going to have so many people around. There's gonna be things to
Yeah.
do. There was not much to do. People would go home on the weekends. I found myself kind of like alone a lot of the time,
Yeah.
demotivated. The class that was playing with me also weren't really happy. I think all of us ended up transferring or leaving.
Right.
We didn't really have the best experience. And then culture-wise of the university, I liked my professors a lot and I liked what I was studying, but I didn't feel as though I was being challenged that much.
Right.
And I didn't feel as though my peers around me had ambition in the way that I did. And so I found myself stagnant and I was just always like reaching for more. And I was just very dissatisfied overall. So I decided to transfer.
Was it hard to make that decision to transfer and go to another university?
Yes, it was very difficult for me. I knew that I wanted to get out of there, but I didn't realize that actually until the summer because I had a hiccup with the team and I spoke with the coach and we agreed that I was going to come back and kind of like start on a clean slate and we were all going to have a better mindset going into the next season. But when I got home, I realized that not many other people had bad experiences in the way that I did, and I was shocked. So everyone would ask, how's college? Did you love it?
Yeah.
And I was like, not really. And
Yeah.
everyone else was happy, and I thought, okay, I'm doing something wrong then, or maybe I'm not in the right environment. And so during the summer, I was thinking of where can I go because I would like to leave. Like I was so
Right.
adamant about leaving that I looked back in my emails at who else was recruiting me and I was like kind of, hey, are you still recruiting or still interested? And that's how I ended up going back to St. Thomas because the coach was heavily recruiting me prior to that freshman year and I just was really adamant about going out of state and just kind of
Sure.
leaving town as one does.
Right.
Again, I would,
Right.
want to get out of I want to get away from mom and dad, but now I was like, no, actually I miss it. I would like them to be at my games and so yeah.
And now I was just, does soccer have in college, soccer players have transfer portals too? It's not just basketball and football, right?
They do, but that was a recent, I believe that
Yeah, this
began
is
in the
more,
past few years.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Um,
they do.
yeah, and now it's like last year for basketball, it was like 1,500 kids in the basketball portal. And I'm like, it's like a whole nother universe in there. Like
Yeah.
and they're just like left and right. If they don't like something, they go in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and yeah, it's very common. And for me, I wish I had a transfer portal so I could just drop my resume in a box and see who wanted me. But I was out there doing the heavy lifting myself. I was like, hey, I'm sending emails to the people that were recruiting me before.
Right.
And I did get traction with a few universities, but I went with the University of St. Thomas. It was such a great fit.
And it's a beautiful place to live. Obviously, you live right
Yeah,
outside of Houston, and I've been by there. It's really nice, and all of the you're away, but not too far away. And your parents can
exactly.
come and everything. Um, then, so you're in college, and you've transferred back to Houston. What is your mindset then about? Did you ever have aspirations? Like, was it like what was the end goal with soccer?
So end goal was soccer going into college, and even while transferring, it was still just to play in college. I didn't decide to pursue playing professionally until about my junior year of college,
Right.
and that's because St. Thomas doesn't have a home field on campus. A lot of the campus is very small, so you find a lot of athletes going to different universities or high schools as using the practice fields, and so. For us, our home field we shared with the Houston Dash and the Houston Dynamo,
Yeah.
those training facilities. And
Right.
so every
Very nice
morning
facilities
they
to share.
were. Yeah, they were very nice and very motivating because they would train right next to you. So you get to look over and think, dang, wish I could do that.
Right.
Or, oh, maybe I can keep up with this person. And so
Right.
it really was one summer we were training me and a couple of my teammates in like a off-season program. And I noticed I was kind of sitting there thinking, I feel like I could hang if I really just applied myself, or I thought, what does it take? And I think a lot of it is application.
Hmm.
I was never like, I'm gonna go pro. It was just, oh, can I apply myself and can I get there? I, I would like the word I'm looking for is accredit myself to being a player who's constantly working hard to get to the next level. I'm never just the best player or just a
Right.
starter. Like I'm constantly earning my way there. And so I saw it as a challenge, playing alongside those girls. And so put my mind to it, did
Did
it.
you ever think about the Olympics or the World Cup? Is it the
Yes.
World Cup?
It would be, yeah, like a national team.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I have dual citizenship in Scotland and then in the US. But so and the pool of players who are trying to play in the US is just it's very, very competitive. And if you
Yes.
don't have a foot in the door at a young age, you're kind of overlooked. And I don't think I would make a US national team. I've never made like a camp or a call up.
Right.
But for Scotland, yes, that was more realistic because the pool is smaller. And so that's what led me to my first team that I played for was in Scotland. So I could get
Right.
my foot in the door, I could be seen, and then work my way into that team.
Okay. So you're back in Houston, you're back at University of St. Thomas, and your degree, you finally realize it's going to be psychology, correct? Sports
Yes.
psychology. And you graduate. Were you getting any recruitment from pro camps or pro organizations that last year in college?
Um, Good question. And no, what I did was I asked around my senior year if, I asked people who I knew who played professionally, how did you get there? Or I asked old
Right.
trainers, how did this person play in Ireland or Iceland? Like, how are they there? And I found that it's through an agent or just
Mm.
really like a contact. For example, if I knew somebody now that played in Germany, I would ask that direct player, how
Mhm.
did you get there? And they would send me maybe the coach's email because you don't even really need an agent. You just speak directly to them.
Right.
But having an agent is helpful. It's just people will always advise you to be very cautious on who you choose, just so that
Mhm.
you know their motives and what their goals are and how they're going to value you and help you.
That's a good comment right there because agents, I spent several years teaching job search as we talked about prior to coming on.
Mhm.
And um, any type of recruiter, they get paid off of every person they
Yep,
place. And I don't
correct.
think that people truly understand that. They're like, well, this person emailed me and they're so excited. And I'm like, sure they are. They're looking at you as a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone is has an ulterior motive, but they're a lot of times they're only looking at how can I place this person to get the most amount of money. They're not looking at is this the best place for you?
Correct.
And I think that's important no matter what you're trying to do.
Hmm.
Recruiters, agents, they're all about making that money because that's how they do it. And I love the fact that you talk about, because I think, obviously the athletes today that are in high school that are at the top of their game, no matter what
Hmm.
their sport is, they're obviously being seen by Division 1 coaches, whatever their sport is. But I think that it's important for those other players look at sports as an opportunity to get an education. And
Yes.
just like you talked about, they're not going to be recruited heavily by a lot of coaches, and a lot of coaches may not really know them. And I think it's important still that these young athletes start looking at how can I market myself in front
Yes.
of these coaches and do more work like that instead of sitting back and hoping social media will put them in front of somebody. I think
Yeah.
they're missing out on a lot of opportunities there, no matter what the environment is with sports. So you finish and you how long did it take? Like, so when you graduated, did you have a position then to go to? Did you have a team to go to? Or how long was that process once you graduated? It's kind of like, now what?
Hmm. Um, so I didn't have a team ready to go to as soon as I graduated, and I did mention that I tore my ACL going into my freshman year of college. So at Morehead, I took a redshirt year, meaning
Okay.
at St. Thomas, I completed 4 seasons. So
Oh, okay.
I graduated in the fall of 2018 as opposed to the spring, so I could get that extra season.
Right.
And so when I graduated, I joined a semi-professional team in Houston, and that helped me make a contact where I got to Scotland. So I went in July. So it took me 7 months. But in that 7 months, I was playing on a team, getting game time, getting
Right.
exposure, and then making the connection with a coach who connected me to somebody in Scotland. So I went in July of 2019.
So you weren't just like sitting at home waiting for or trying to figure out what was going to happen. There was continuous movement in your
Yes.
career. So that's good. So what were your thoughts when you get the call or the email or what that you've been accepted or they were being asked to join the Scotland team? Like, what was that like?
It was surreal because I thought, oh shit, I'm actually doing this. Excuse my French, but
No, no,
I
you're
couldn't
fine.
believe I
You're
couldn't
fine.
believe it. I'm like, finally, it's your hard work paying off. And then that's just the beginning. That's not the end. It's like, okay, now the real stuff starts.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
exciting.
had you been to Scotland since you were born there?
I hadn't, no. So it was my first time back. So really exciting for me because I was going to Edinburgh, which is the capital of
Mhm.
Scotland. I was going to be able to see old family friends who I didn't recognize or remember because I was too young to know. I
Sure.
actually lived with some old family friends and they hosted me while I was there.
That's so
And
cool.
yeah, I got to meet those old friends that I have in baby pictures that we didn't really know each other, but now it's like 24 years or 20 years
Yeah,
later. So it was fun. But yeah, I hadn't gone back. Neither had my parents, and they came to visit me eventually, but first time back in a while, and it was beautiful.
it is beautiful. I wish I could go again, but yeah, it is. So, and even though like you don't have Scottish heritage really, but it's your birthright and you're part you have a Scottish national,
I have a UK passport.
yeah, UK
Yeah.
passport. UK. Okay. So that first game when you take the field, how did that feel?
I was nervous, and I don't really get nervous, but it was excited nerves, and
Mhm.
I don't know. I was like, I need a this is the time to prove it. This is everything
Right.
that I've worked for. But very exciting, exhilarating. And I went in to a very competitive match at the time. I think we lost or tied the game, but it was just I was excited to be there, run my ass off, and prove myself.
Um, ooh. So let's talk about your career overseas. So you spent how many you were on two teams in Scotland, correct?
Yes.
So what was
Yeah.
that process like? Was because I don't really understand like the whole atmosphere of playing professional soccer overseas. So for you, was it you're being traded or you're just looking for another opportunity or what was that in the realm of you changing teams?
So there is the path. of being traded or being or transferring. And what I really did is that my season contract, it was only for half a season. So I
Okay.
went from July to November or December,
Right.
and there was an opportunity to re-sign with that team. However, there was a team that had recruited me prior that also in Edinburgh that I declined because this other team was in a higher rank and they were in Champions League, which is like a very big thing for
Right.
soccer players. And so I went with the first team. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to try a different experience, but stay in the same country and go with the other team that was still interested in me.
Right.
So that was me declining another contract, and then I went with a new one.
Okay.
But that
And
was my own.
so then your contract ends and with the second team. And what did you do then? Like, were you obviously trying to still get on another team, or were you having to go back to the States?
Yeah. So if we're doing our math, 2019 I ended. 2020 I
Okay.
went to yeah. So COVID happened is what happened.
Yes.
But and I will mention in that January time period, I actually signed with a new agent just so I could see other opportunities.
Hmm.
And I did a trial in Sweden, so like a tryout for about a month.
Right.
And I was being dragged on for a little too long. And then they just
Are you drowning in work and struggling to stay organized and make progress on your goals? Well, I've got the solution right here. Introducing my Success Blueprint Planner. It's not just any planner, it's a planner and a journal. And it's your tool for taking charge of your busy life and achieving your dreams. Ready to make this year your most successful yet? I am. Head to my website and grab your copy of the Success Blueprint Planner today. sandy-adams.com/books.
had they weren't able to sign me. And so I hopped back over to Scotland, and I was having the best time, having, finding my feet. We had a full
Right.
month of games and then COVID happened, so I had to come back to the US. And that's when I took a break from playing on a team because there were no teams to be played on at the
Sure.
time.
Sure.
And yeah, and then in 2021 I went to Hungary, played in
Okay.
Hungary.
So,
Yeah.
what did you do, obviously, in that time during COVID, and everything was basically shut down and you're at home? Like, what were you doing every day to stay sane? Did you have any type of job? Like, what was that?
Yeah, good question. I first spent, I think, the 2 months here in Katy, and then for the rest of that year, I moved to Atlanta with the boyfriend I was dating at the time. And so in the South, like the weather was great at that time.
Mhm. It was.
I kept sane by working out, by staying in shape because I was waiting for that phone call to say, "Hey, we're ready to take you
Right.
back. Come back and play." So at any moment, I could have been chosen, but I did work. I worked for a physical therapy clinic and I was a physical therapy technician. And then I also worked with a tutoring service that
Hmm.
some kids like the at-home tutoring. So the
Right.
kids that were doing virtual learning, I was working with them. But yeah, I had a great time in Atlanta. It was a beautiful place.
It is. It is a beautiful place. So, how was your mindset? Because typically, it wasn't like you weren't getting calls to play. COVID had shut everything down and you were just kind of waiting. Was that difference? Did that impact your mindset at all or your motivation? That it was
Yeah,
kind of out of your control in a different way.
yeah, I think I dealt with that okay. I didn't get too upset about it because it was happening to everybody. So
Yes.
it wasn't
Yes.
personal. It was just this is going on. We're all dealing with this. Nobody knows how to handle it. So the
Right.
only thing I know to do is to stay in shape so I'm ready to go whenever I need to and to get a job so that I can sustain myself before I go. But I was pretty motivated. I joined I joined training sessions with another club in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
Concord FC, and I played with the boys team actually, a U18 boys team, just so I could stay up to speed because I didn't really
Right.
know anyone.
Sure.
Um, and it's to play with boys, you become more aggressive and play quicker tempo. So I did that for I think like 5 or 6 months. So I was in shape and ready to go.
So when did that next call come and how did it come about?
Well, there was one call that happened in the fall of 2020, and I did decline it. It was in Iceland, and I declined it because it was only 3 months, and it was
Okay.
just too short of a period for me. It wasn't really worth my while. But I went to Hungary in February of 2021, and that call came about just like a random phone number called me, and I talk about this in one of my podcasts. And I was up in New York visiting a friend, and I had like a beer or two. I'm like, I never answer random phone calls, but whatever. And I hear like a Hungarian accent, and I'm thinking, okay, let me, hello. This is, yeah. And it was an agent, and he was Hungarian, and he mentioned to me that he got my contact through somebody I trained with back in Houston, like a personal
Right.
trainer with a soccer. And they said that they were looking for people in my position, and that they had another girl from Texas there, which was one of my best friends. And so I already knew someone that was there. I
Sure.
was looking, and so I was just ready to go. And so I went.
So was obviously in Scotland it wasn't, but was it ever a language issue to play
Yes,
in these foreign countries?
all the time, all of them. I think
Yeah.
that I've overcome so many cultural and language barriers. And the funny one is in Scotland, they speak English, but the accent is so
Yeah,
thick
it
that
is.
it's like another language almost. It took me, I'm going to talk about this. I haven't gotten to it yet on my podcast, but it took me about 2 months to get accustomed to their lingo,
Hmm.
the slang that they use. Like I was the only American, again Scottish, but
Right.
I'm basically American.
You're
Just
Yeah.
I'm American. You can hear it in the voice. But everybody else was Scottish, and so I became a very good listener.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
chatty, and I'm not shy, but over there, people probably thought I was very introverted and
Yeah.
shy because I was constantly watching what we're gonna do and then listening because there were so many new words to pick up on.
And you almost have to also use a lot of those other senses, like you're constantly having to be aware of every nuance and everything that's going on. So it's actually, I think you're using more energy in order to have those conversations.
Yes.
But it is hard when you're listening to somebody who it's like you know what they're saying, but you don't know what they're saying. And I remember I did my student teaching for my master's in Germany and England, but in England I was in a fourth grade class, and most of the children were of Indian descent, so that was already
Okay.
weird to see a child that looks Indian and they
Hmm.
speak British English.
Hmm.
But then, like I was sitting at the table and they said, "Do you want my rubber, ma'am?" And I was like, "Do I want your rubber?" And it was an eraser. And it's
Yeah.
like all those little bitty things. Oh, and then they made fun of me because they said they had some Adidas shoes on. And in England, they say Adidas.
Yeah.
And they already knew I couldn't say it correctly. And they pointed to their shoe and they're like, "What's this, miss?" And I said, "It's
Yeah.
Adidas." And then they all busted out laughing.
Yes. Yeah. I think for the first month, I mean, I have a notes section in my phone of funny words that I think are just hilarious and
Yes.
completely foreign, but to them it's so normal. And yeah, first month, like I was, of course, they made jokes about my accent, but I embraced it after a while. At
Which you
first, it
don't
kind of
really
bugged
have
me.
an accent, may I say. You do not have an accent.
Thank you. There's no slang to me, right? It's just English.
It is. It's just English. Like I've heard a
Thank you.
lot of people with bad accents, but you don't have one. So, what was the biggest or like the top three things that you think helped you grow as a person by playing overseas?
Oh wow. I think one was growing by myself because
Mhm.
although I was with teammates and other people or sometimes with a friend that I did know, you're really just putting yourself out there. When I went to Scotland, I didn't know anyone. So it's pretty lonesome, but I got comfortable with becoming alone. And instead of disliking it or being sad about it, I just learned a lot about myself and I got to travel. I became more comfortable navigating different transportation systems, which down in the South, we don't really have trains or
No,
public
they
transportation.
don't.
We drive everywhere. Um,
Exactly.
just the cultural differences for me was a big plus because I got a little bit more insight to how other people live life.
Yeah.
I think it's invaluable experiences that I gained. And so being alone and having to sit with myself alone, I came to understand myself a lot.
Hmm.
um, I know how to, I know how I work now.
Right, right, right.
But learning other cultures was a beautiful thing as well. And I got to kind of pick and choose, see what I would like. Would I like to
Hmm.
be in America? Would I like to live abroad? Would I, you know, yeah, just I learned a whole lot about it.
And I think it teaches you a lot about yourself. I've several friends, and especially through this podcast, a lot of them, they left college and went overseas to play pro ball back before email. And so
Mhm.
they talked about how they started reading a lot, and
Yeah,
they had to figure out, like, I can't just sit here all day long. Like, what am I going to do? Several of them
exactly.
found the love in coaching. They just go out to schools and say, "Hey, can I do some coaching here?"
Yeah.
And it was, several of them learned to cook really well because they were like, I can't go out and eat all the time. That's
Yeah.
no fun. So it does force you into a different environment, and you kind of have to figure out what it is that you like, and what, and about yourself, like what you're made of.
Yeah,
That you,
I would agree. And
yeah,
you reminded me, but I love to read and I love to write. And I do, like I mentioned, I'm very extroverted and social, and I do like social media, and it was up and coming as I grew up.
right.
I'm a millennial child and adult now.
That's right. That's right.
Uh, but yeah, I started my okay in 2020 when I was abroad. I found myself sitting around with so much time. Yes, you
Mhm.
can explore, but finances are limited. So what can I
Sure.
do? And I created a website which I advertised myself as Ads by Chefs, which no longer really exists. But I did graphic design, so I would make some graphics for people and manage social media content.
Oh,
And I had a blog because I love to write, and then I would read a lot. So I do now have that same website. It's still ShavonHiggins.com, but I've taken away the social media aspect because I just have one client. I'm content with that.
right.
And now I advertise myself as a sports psychology consultant because I went back to get my master's for that. I'm using my podcast as a platform, but I gained invaluable skills because I learned how to make a website. I learned
Yeah.
how to advertise myself. I learned how to do plan social media content. I mean, I've been through different bits and bobs, made very many connections. And so, yeah, I learned a lot about myself, and I'm using everything that I had been doing while I was twiddling my thumbs in
Right.
between training sessions. And I'm using it all today, all of it.
And they're all great skills to have no matter what it is you do in life.
Yeah.
And for those out there, I'll put all of Siobhan's social media and her website in the show notes so that you guys can go and check her out. Um, what was let's talk about the rest of, like, the other countries that you played in, and
Yeah.
how kind of the trajectory of those next few years kind of went.
Okay, so in order, I touched on Scotland, and then I went did a trial in Sweden, and then I went to Hungary. Hungary was, I think, my most challenging contract because I speak about this in my podcast, but I it was an unethical experience, and I was coached by basically an abusive coach, and I stuck it out during the whole season, um, but it made me a resilient human being, more so than I already was. And
Right.
again, you learn something from everything, but after that, I took a break in the summer, and then I got a contract in Portugal in the fall of 2021. And then that was short-lived because the coaching staff at the time they just cut like a handful of people. I was one of them. And
Yeah.
for your knowledge and for the audience's knowledge, you can only have so many foreign players. We're more expensive.
I learned
It's
that
limited.
recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just one of the people that they didn't need. And so I went home after a month, but that one was a heartbreaker because it was a beautiful country. I was loving it. And so after that brings me to
Oh, 1 minute.
2020.
So
Yeah,
you put in your notes something about you lived on the beach in Portugal?
it was in Porto, Portugal, which is a couple miles from the beach, and I love the beach. It was a beautiful place. I would recommend it to anyone, especially Porto. It's so romantic. The food is brilliant. The people
Right.
were so nice. Um, it was a great time, and I was very disappointed to have to go.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would recommend it, and I would definitely go back. So that was end of 2021. 2022, as soon as I got home from that contract, there were other opportunities for me, but I was kind of feeling burnt out at that point because I had just endured Hungary. It wasn't a great time, and then just been cut short from something I was really loving. So I stayed home for the full year and I worked full time. I got a job and I thought maybe like to be quite frank, I didn't want anything to do with soccer at that point. I felt burnt out. I
Sure.
was sad about it. I knew that deep down in my heart, like that wasn't going to be it for me, and I was eventually going to play. Just didn't know when. I needed time. So I got a job, and I worked for about 7 months, and then after that, I pursued my master's in sports psychology because the year before playing in Hungary or Portugal, my University of St. Thomas, my alma mater, they started a new program that I was very interested in. But I was thinking, oh, I'm abroad, I can't do it right now. And so
Mm.
then, as soon as I finished my career with recruiting and something with NIL as well, I transitioned to another career. I found myself with time and I thought, why don't I get my master's now? The school year is starting. Might as well add some student debt.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
so that's what led me into starting my master's is that I had that year gap. And then being in my master's program kind of gave me that push or motivation to play again, which is when I played
Okay.
again last year.
Okay.
Mhm.
Was it weird being back in school? Was it hard?
You know, it was challenging, but I love school and I love
Yeah.
education. Like if I could get a
Yeah.
PhD right now, which I probably can, I would do it. It's just not really, it's not feasible and it's not necessary, but I do love
Right.
to learn. And I love living in the classroom. I do love writing, so I don't mind the research
Right.
papers or papers at all, but I enjoyed it.
I miss the camaraderie. Like especially in my undergrad, it was political science, and I went through like all 4 years with like the certain group of people. And we got really tight, and I just missed like the debate and stuff in class. Like, I
Yeah.
miss that camaraderie and just, that kind of stuff. But so, and you're right about the PhD, sometimes it's like you can love, you can be interested in something, but still like, is that needed? Is it worth the effort that you would have to put out and things like that? And there's all kinds of ways to learn and educate yourself also and expand your horizons that way. So
Yeah.
let's I'm going to let you talk about 2023 and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Okay. So in 2023, I made the decision in early January, February to pursue playing soccer again professionally. I figured, I'm not done. I want another go at this. Let's end on a good note.
Right.
And I know, foreshadowing. And so in February, I signed with the team in Northern Ireland. My goal was to make it back over to Scotland, but they were closed with their recruiting for that season. So the next best option was Northern Ireland. I was very particular about wanting to be in the UK, wanting to be in an
Right.
English speaking country
Right.
and close to people that I knew. My grandmother also lives in Spain, and then the family friends that I made were in
Wait a minute.
Scotland.
Because your mom's Ecuadorian. Okay. Okay. But when I was stalking you,
Yeah.
okay, I read a report that said you were literally, because you were the first person signed for the Northern Ireland team, like you were the first woman soccer
Mhm.
player in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and that it sounds very cool, and it is,
It is
it's
cool.
really just it's just a timing thing.
I don't care. I don't care.
I,
You take that and you run with it.
okay, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it was a time because what happened is in Northern Ireland, which it's different than Ireland. I want everyone to know that
Yes,
if you
it
don't.
is.
hmm
Yes.
they had teams and they were very competitive, but this was the first year, 2023, when the team became fully professional into where they could compete in the Champions League as well. So
Okay.
where players were being paid to play finally. And so
So
for me,
uh,
timing.
I was just gonna, but yeah, sometimes timing is everything. So the
Correct.
Champions League for us non-soccer people out there, kind of explain what the Champions League is.
Okay, so Champions League is, let's think, I'm trying to
I
make
mean,
an
obviously it's
analogy.
a League of Champions, but like,
Correct. So
but
just think of the champion of every country are playing each other, and
okay,
It's a European tournament.
okay. So it's kind of like, so okay, I get what you're saying. So the winner in each country plays for like a European championship, kind of, but they don't call
Correct.
it a European championship, do they?
I might be getting this wrong,
We'll
but because
just table that.
there are the Euros and then there's Champions League, but I'm pretty sure we should fact check myself, but the Champions League is the top team or sometimes top two teams in each country, and it's just the best of the best.
That was something when, what is that show? that was on Apple with what's his name? It's about the soccer
Are you
in
gonna tell me the Ted Lasso thing?
Yes. So, but I mean, it did teach me about like I didn't what I found fascinating was so if I'm correct, you have to win so many to then move up to the next category.
Yeah, it's like a knockout.
Okay.
It's knockout. So you'll play. So there's a group stage, like the round of 32, and there's
Okay.
group, and then of that group, one or two move forward, and then you play, and it's knockout. So they do a home and away game, so
Okay.
you get the equal opportunity,
It's
but the goal yeah,
very
it's
confusing.
yeah, just think of it like a tournament style of play.
Okay.
So it's a tournament, and then there are groups, just depending on how well you did that season, or sometimes it's random.
Okay.
Um, like if you finished, I'm trying to think, if you finished top, then you'll get like priority, or depending on your goal differences.
Okay.
And so you have a group, and then of that group, one or two go through, and then it's a free for all knockout. We'll go
Okay.
back and forth, your country, their country, whoever wins goes through, and then it keeps going until you have a ultimate winner, a
Okay,
champion.
so let's and I interrupted you and I'm so sorry for that. But let's
It's
go
okay.
back to the you're in Northern Ireland and I keep rolling
Yeah.
that name together. Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland. Yes. So I got to Northern Ireland in March of 2023. And unfortunately, after 2 weeks, I sustained an ACL, MCL, and meniscus injury. And so I got injured and wasn't actually able to play for the whole season. But for others to know, I was continuing my master's degree while I was abroad because my program was hybrid and our high flex. And so I was able to do it online as well. So I was still continuing my degree while I was over there.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I was waiting around. Yeah, I was waiting for surgery. Some complications happened, and I ended up going home in August. And in August, I finished my degree in person, graduated in December. And then with that degree, I thought, how can I use all of my experiences
Right.
to kind of better the lives of others or make them laugh? Like my goal really with my podcast is to storytell, make people laugh, and then give advice and just like share the education that I've learned from my experiences.
So how's your podcast been going? I've only gotten to listen to one or watch one of them, but
Yeah.
what have you found about yourself, but also about the whole process from podcasting?
Well, it's a baby podcast, meaning it's just very new. I
That's
have six
okay.
episodes. I
That's
know, yeah,
okay.
I like it's fun. It's been a project that I've had this idea for about 2 years. When I got home from Hungary, I wanted to just jump on the mic and start talking with friends about it, but I
Right.
figured I wanted to have more of an education-based background before I start just spewing information or advice. That's why I
Sure.
waited till I finished my degree. But it's going well. I have six episodes. The seventh one will come out on Thursday, and I love it. I'm very fortunate to have a friend who's just immaculate at video
Hmm.
creativity. Everything I use is from Taylor Smith, and if you need anyone to do a video for you, he's your guy. He works at a Sugarland. He works for a stem cell research company, but I'm very fortunate to have a friend that has helped me because I don't know what I'm doing. I just hop on and start talking. And everything that you see that it looks great is because of him.
Okay. Does he have a website? So we want to give him a shout out.
You know what? He doesn't have a website, but and I'm
Shame
gonna
on
make one.
him.
I know. I think he just does so well he doesn't need to, but I told him um I'll make one for him because I have my experience making websites now. But yeah, Taylor Smith, he's a creative director. He does videography. He works with a lot of rappers in Houston, and then he has a full-time job with a stem cell research company where he does incredible videos.
Like that's for me. I'm like, dude, that's another. Because I have two podcasts because I'm just crazy.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
but I love people's stories. I love how all the things that make up someone, and I just find it fascinating. It's a fascinating story. So as we're winding down, what is next for you? Like, what do you see? Well, and let me go back because I want to ask one question. Has this past 12 months, how have you dealt with that mentally? Like how has that been as an athlete and kind of the unknown and trying to like go on with some areas of your life, like mentally, how have you coped with that, I guess is what I want to ask.
hmm and I appreciate you asking that. I would say this past 12 months specifically has been the most challenging my entire life as an athlete and just as a person.
Mhm.
Because I was severely depressed when I was in Northern Ireland. I was injured. It was so much unknown, uncertainty, pain. Um, my career it's
Right.
paused right now. It's on pause. It's not finished, but it was hard to deal with that. But the way that I coped is by channeling the other things to my hobbies, because as a sports psychology consultant, I know and have the knowledge to tap into different hobbies so that in the case you don't have your sport, what else do you
Right.
have? So
Right.
you're not dealing with an identity crisis.
Right.
Which I didn't experience because I don't identify as just a soccer player. Like I'm Siobhan, a sister. I'm Siobhan, a writer. I'm a reader. I'm a coach. I'm a friend.
Right.
I'm a yogi. I'm just about to finish my yoga teacher training program
I think
actually, and
that's awesome.
I'll be teaching soon. But I have a therapist that I see weekly, if not bi-weekly. My family, I'm comfortable with speaking up about how I'm feeling.
Hmm.
Um, I have great friends and great people in my life that God has put in my life, and so just kind of tapping into that, knowing when to speak up, knowing that moving your body is very important. And so for me, it's going for a walk because for a couple of months I wasn't able to do much because of the injury, but it's been a year. It's been actually a year. A couple of days ago was a year to the date when I got injured. I know it was a rough week for me,
Sure.
um, but yeah, just tap into other things because again, like I mentioned, you might not have that sport, but you need to have a way to
Mm,
cope.
you
And I
do.
think it was rough. It was rough for the first 4 or 5 months, and I came home to be in a better headspace and to be in a comfortable setting where I knew I was comfortable. There was people here that I knew that I could count on, that I loved, that the weather is different as well.
Right.
There's more sunlight here as opposed to over there.
I do miss, because, speaking of that, I do miss when I wanted to move back because I grew up in Tennessee. That was part of the thing. We don't have hurricanes here, but
Mm,
we have tornadoes here, which to me are scarier because with a hurricane, I can move. But the biggest thing was during the winter, it's not that I get depressed, but I feel my energy is less. And in
yeah.
Houston, the sun is bright like the whole year. And I
Yeah.
really felt more energized in Houston.
Yeah.
And,
It's a
and that's,
thing.
it is a thing. It's a very much a
Definitely.
thing.
Yeah.
And you talk about um, having the other passions and hobbies and things like that, especially for the guys, because I think a lot of times it's the male athletes that have a harder time talking about what they're going
Mhm.
through. But so
Yeah.
many of them have talked about they didn't they didn't have another hobby or anything else. And, regardless of how even the ones that chose to end their career, they had they had to find something to fill in what they got from their sport. And that was the
Yes.
hardest thing for them, was to find that. And some haven't really. They've
Hmm.
used things. But I think that it's important, and even for kids today, and it's interesting, a lot of the dads who've been on my show, they've
Hmm.
talked about how they drill that into their kids. You need to have more than this sport.
Yeah.
Like, you really need to try everything and have other interests. Um, do you think that, like, do you think, let me ask this, because it's kind of, because like we said, you're not officially retired, but
Correct.
I found your story very interesting because it goes through the ups and downs of an athlete who's not playing at the
Hmm.
moment.
Yeah.
Um, but where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Ooh. 5 years. So that's a heavy loaded question because I'm a
It
person
is.
that will look at my life in like 1 year increments because
Okay. Okay.
I never know. But um yeah, I haven't thought I to be quite frank, I
Okay.
have not
That's
thought
fine.
5 years, but I do
Okay.
hope to continue my podcast. I do hope that it grows and
Mm-hmm.
I see myself being a sports psychology consultant for the rest of my life
Right.
and giving talks or um being contracted with teams and helping them with team bonding, creating the skills, creating confidence, working on their self-talk, working on motivation, working on focus and discipline, and just being able to uh, help an athlete become resilient and then maybe not prevent, but be equipped to deal with the challenges
Yes.
that you can face. And that
Yes.
is my goal. I know that I will always do those things and probably still be a yoga instructor as well.
So, if people are out there listening, which I hope they
Mhm.
are, who is your perfect, like, are all of your podcast episodes, well, you've had 6, but are
Mhm.
they always with a guest? Do you want
Uh,
them to always be with a guest?
so I feel most comfortable so far with the guests just
Okay.
because speaking, I mean, if I do talk, I don't want to be rambling and I'm pretty organized, so I'd like to have a script. And then when I go on script, I'm not very authentic. I'm like, Make sure you cover these
I
notes, you know?"
struggle the same way. I do. I do.
Yeah. So
Um,
I was just going to mention that I do plan on always having somebody on, whether that's just like a random friend to
right.
talk about experiences so that they can bounce questions and ideas off of myself, and then interviewing people in the same way that I've been doing.
So who's your ideal guest? Like, who would you be looking for to be on your show?
Mm. Honestly, anyone who is an athlete or even not, because I right now I do want to focus on the athletic mindset, but eventually I want to focus on people who are self-made or
Okay.
entrepreneurs or
Right.
that have the transferable skills. But anyone who plays a sport right now, who has any type of athletic experience that I could truly talk to somebody about, how did you, oh, for example, this week, how did one of my friends run every street in the 610 loop in Houston? How did you do that? Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, incredible, right?
Like
And
at the
he and
same time?
no, not all at once. I don't even know how many miles it is, but I think it was in a year. He ran every
Oh,
single street. It's
and
incredible. You'll have to listen to
and of course
it.
I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah, I know.
I'm just
Yeah.
sitting there and like, I want to run every street in the 16 loop. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'll drive every street. But just wondering like what makes that person tick? I want to know their why and I want to know their
Yeah.
how. And then
Yeah.
people can gain something from that because whether they're an athlete or not, this guy is very disciplined or
Hmm.
he's a hard worker or he's very regimented with his routine and what can we gain from him? So
No,
really, everyone has something to bring to the table.
they do. Because I know a ton of people, so I'm happy. That's why I was asking, and the
Oh.
people that listen, even though I think some of them are not athletes, there's a lot that are athletes or have been athletes in the past. We have a lot of former athletes that listen. So,
Mhm.
that's why I was asking because I'm all about referring people to be on your show. So I'll be looking um, for people that might be a good guest for you.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you. I appreciate that. Really,
yeah,
anyone. I do have a content calendar of people lined up, but
right.
I've had people reach out to me. I've been reaching out to others, any athlete, anywhere. I would prefer in person for the time being, just
Sure.
because of the logistics of recording,
Right.
and the quality of the video and voice and whatnot. But yeah, anyone, reach out. Um,
It's funny because I did mine in person on my other podcast. I did it in person until COVID hit. And
oh,
then I was sitting around in Houston and I was like, I am bored out of my mind. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start asking people. Well, because it was COVID, everybody was
mhm.
like, sure, I'll be on the show. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
started recording it with Zoom. And for me, I just found it so much easier to get people for me.
yes,
And because and then I moved back to Tennessee and it just became so much easier. And but that's that, for me, that's how I learned how to do the video and aspect of it. So I do everything. I produce it and everything. Like there's no one else. And that's why
kudos to you.
it's hard. Like my other one, it's not as consistent because most of the time it's just me doing the podcast, which it's, there's only so much time in the week and I'm not going to beat myself up about it. There
Exactly.
is, and you got to make money on top.
Yeah,
It's the main thing. But
yeah.
I'm going to wrap this up because we could just talk for hours. So, what do you think your biggest value is to people today?
Oh man. My biggest value to people. I think that I mean this in a very humble way that I've had a lot of feedback that I've been inspiring to others,
Mhm.
and I really take that to heart, and I believe that's because of my leadership skills and my outspoken personality. And so I think that's why the platform is perfect for me,
Yeah.
speaking about experiences, because I realized or I recognized from a very young age that I do have a voice and I'm comfortable sharing it. And I know that some people aren't
Yeah.
or are too shy or just don't feel that confidence. And I do. And so I'm happy to speak up for other people and just advocate for human rights
Right.
and help others, you know, gain a better perspective. And then the name of the game is to pass on information so that we can
Yes.
make everyone's life better. And that's my goal. And so,
And I think talking about the things that are going on in our lives helps so many people, especially those
yeah,
that don't have that courage to talk themselves. I
yeah.
think that's admirable. So, last question is, what would you tell a 9-year-old Siobhan?
Oh gosh, 9-year-old Siobhan to behave. I joking but not. I would tell her to I would tell her to take a breath because she was very hyperactive and go, go, go. She got in her head. I used to be my own worst enemy. Sometimes I still am, but just to take a breath, to sit, be still, listen, and know that things will work out that the way that they're supposed to.
Okay. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Siobhan, for being on today's show. I appreciate it so much.
And thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate it. I had such a great time and it was really great getting to know you. And I appreciate all the questions and the time.
Well, absolutely. So, as we wrap up this episode, thank you all for listening, sharing our episodes, your comments, and your show reviews. Please take a moment to like, share, and review our podcast on Apple. It helps the show get found by everyone. And I so appreciate every one of you for all of your support. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Fifth Quarter Podcast with my guest, Siobhan Higgins. If you're a former competitive athlete and you're interested in being on the show, or you know someone who should be on the show, please contact me through the website at 5thquarterpodcast.com or via social media. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Have a great rest of the week.